The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and silence filled the 42nd floor of Sterling and Associates. It was 6:30 a.m., and most people were still sleeping in their warm beds. But not her. Isabella Rodriguez had been at her desk since 5:45, already 3 cups of coffee deep into her morning routine. At 32, Isabella was the youngest senior partner in the firm's history. She wore her success like armor, expensive suits, perfect hair, and eyes that could cut through steel. The other lawyers whispered about her when she walked by. They called her the Ice Queen, and she knew it. She didn't care. Actually, she preferred it that way. Her office was like her, cold and perfect. Glass walls, black leather furniture, and not a single personal photo anywhere. Everything had its place, and everything served a purpose, just like Isabella herself. "Good morning, Miss Rodriguez," said her assistant, bringing in a stack of files. "The Henderson case documents are ready for review." Isabella barely looked up from her computer screen. "Put them on the left side of my desk." "Has the new associate arrived yet?" "Yes. He's in conference room 3, filling out paperwork." Isabella nodded but didn't respond. She had heard about the new guy, fresh out of law school, top of his class, and apparently full of big dreams about changing the world. She had eaten dozens of lawyers just like him for breakfast. This one would be no different. The morning passed like every other morning. Isabella reviewed cases, sent sharp emails, and made 3 grown men cry during a client meeting. It was just another Tuesday in her perfectly controlled world. At lunch, she sat alone in her office, eating a salad while reading legal briefs. Through her glass walls, she could see the other lawyers chatting and laughing in the break room. They looked so happy, so carefree. Isabella couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like that. Actually, she couldn't remember if she ever had. Her phone buzzed. "Miss Rodriguez, the new associate is here to see you." Isabella sighed. She had forgotten about him. "Send him in." The door opened, and a tall man with kind eyes walked in. He was wearing a decent suit, though not expensive like hers. His smile was warm and genuine, the kind that made people feel comfortable. Isabella immediately disliked him. "Good afternoon, Miss Rodriguez. I'm David Chen. I wanted to introduce myself and thank you for—" "Sit down," Isabella interrupted, not looking up from her papers. "I don't have time for pleasantries." David sat, his smile faltering slightly. "Of course, I understand you're very busy. I'm assigning you to the Morrison divorce case. It's messy, complicated, and the client is difficult, perfect for someone learning the ropes." Isabella finally looked at him, her expression neutral. "I expect the research summary on my desk by tomorrow morning. No excuses, no extensions." "I'll get right on it," David said, standing up. "Thank you for the opportunity." As he reached the door, Isabella called out, "One more thing. This isn't law school anymore. Here, we win cases. We don't hold hands and sing songs about justice. If you can't handle that, you won't last a week." David turned back, and for a moment, Isabella saw something in his eyes. Not fear, like she expected. Not anger either. It was something else. Something that made her feel uncomfortable. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I believe we can win cases and still be decent human beings." After he left, Isabella stared at the closed door for a long moment. No one had ever talked to her like that, not with disrespect, but with conviction. It bothered her more than she wanted to admit. The rest of the day passed in its usual blur of meetings and phone calls. Isabella stayed late, as always. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew and the security guard. She preferred it this way, quiet, peaceful, and completely under her control. Around 9 p.m., she noticed a light still on in one of the associate offices. She walked over and found David hunched over a stack of files, scribbling notes on a legal pad. He looked tired but focused. "You're still here," she said from the doorway. David looked up, startled. "Oh, Miss Rodriguez." "Yes, I'm just finishing up the Morrison case research. It's fascinating, actually. The husband claims I don't need the details now. Just have it ready tomorrow." But she didn't walk away. Instead, she found herself standing there, watching him work. He moved with purpose. But there was something gentle about the way he handled the papers, like he cared about the people behind the legal documents. "Can I ask you something?" David said, looking up at her. "Why did you become a lawyer?" The question caught Isabella off guard. "That's personal." "I just meant, was it always about winning? Or did you start out wanting to help people?" Isabella felt her jaw tighten. Helping people is a luxury most lawyers can't afford. This is a business, not a charity. But it doesn't have to be just about money and winning, does it? These cases, they're about real people going through the worst times of their lives. Real people who pay our bills, Isabella said coldly. Don't confuse sentiment with success. David nodded slowly. "I suppose we just see things differently." "Yes, we do. And that's why I'm a senior partner at 32, and you're working until 9 p.m. on your first day." Isabella walked away, but his words stayed with her. As she packed up her things, she couldn't shake the feeling that David had seen something in her that she had buried a long time ago, something she had worked very hard to forget. On the drive home to her empty penthouse apartment, Isabella thought about David's question. Why had she become a lawyer? The answer was simple, really. She had learned early that being soft meant getting hurt. Being kind meant being taken advantage of, and being vulnerable meant being destroyed. So she had built walls, thick, high walls that kept everyone out and kept her safe inside. She had become the ice queen because ice didn't break. It didn't cry. It didn't get betrayed by the people it trusted most. But something about David's gentle persistence had cracked something inside her. Just a tiny crack, barely visible. But it was there. And Isabella Rodriguez, the woman who controlled everything, suddenly felt like she was losing control of the one thing that mattered most. Herself. As she fell asleep that night in her king-sized bed, surrounded by expensive furniture and complete silence, Isabella had no idea that her perfectly ordered world was about to change forever. And it would all start with a man who believed that winning and caring could exist in the same space. The Ice Queen's domain was about to meet its first real challenge, and for the first time in years, Isabella wasn't sure she was ready for the battle ahead. 3 weeks had passed since David joined the firm, and Isabella was beginning to regret not firing him on his first day. Not because he was bad at his job. Actually, he was annoyingly good at it. The problem was that he kept doing things that made her feel uncomfortable, like bringing her coffee every morning. Not fancy coffee from the expensive place downstairs, but simple black coffee from the break room. He never said anything about it, just left it on her desk with a small smile. Isabella told herself she didn't care, but she found herself looking forward to that stupid cup of coffee more than she wanted to admit. "Miss Rodriguez?" Her assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Sterling wants to see you in his office." "It's about the Hawthorne merger." Isabella's stomach dropped. The Hawthorne merger was the biggest case of the year. If she could pull it off, it would make her the most powerful lawyer in the city. If she failed, well, failure wasn't an option. Sterling was sitting behind his massive desk when she walked in. He was old, gray, and had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Isabella, my dear, sit down. We need to talk about the Hawthorne case." "I'm already working on it," Isabella said, sitting straight in her chair. "I have a complete strategy. Ready? I'm sure you do. But this case is too important to handle alone. I'm assigning David Chen to work with you." Isabella felt her blood turn cold. "Sir, I don't need help. I can handle this myself." "It's not a request, Isabella. It's a decision. David has fresh ideas, and frankly, some of our clients think you can be a bit intense. Isabella had heard that word before. It was what people said when they meant cold, mean, or difficult, but she had never cared before. Why did it bother her now? "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "But I'm still the lead attorney. Of course, David will report to you. Try to play nice, Isabella. This case could make or break both of your careers." Walking back to her office, Isabella felt anger building in her chest. She didn't need a babysitter. She didn't need fresh ideas. And she certainly didn't need David Chen messing up her perfectly planned strategy. But when she told David about the assignment, he didn't look excited or nervous. He just nodded and said, "What do you need me to do?" "Stay out of my way," Isabella snapped. "I've been handling big cases since before you graduated high school. I'm 29. "Miss Rodriguez, I don't think you're that much older than me," Isabella glared at him. "Age isn't about yours. It's about experience, and I have plenty of both." Over the next few days, they worked together in Isabella's office. Well, Isabella worked while David sat quietly in the corner, reading through files and taking notes. He didn't ask stupid questions or try to impress her with fancy legal terms. He just worked. On Thursday night, Isabella was still at her desk at 11 p.m., trying to figure out a complicated contract issue. Her eyes were burning, and her head was pounding. She had been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. "Maybe we should call it a night," David said softly. "You've been working for 18 hours straight." "I'm fine," Isabella said, not looking up from her papers. "When's the last time you ate something?" Isabella paused. She couldn't remember. "I don't need food. I need to solve this problem." David stood up and walked to her desk. "Miss Rodriguez, you're human. You need food and sleep, just like everyone else." "I'm not everyone else." "No, you're not. You're incredibly smart and hardworking. But you're also exhausted. This problem will still be here tomorrow morning." Isabella looked up at him, and for a moment, she saw genuine concern in his eyes. When was the last time someone had worried about her? When was the last time someone had cared if she ate or slept? "I can't stop," she said, and her voice sounded smaller than she intended. "This case is too important. Then let me help you, really help you, not just sit in the corner and watch you work yourself to death." Isabella stared at him for a long moment. Letting people help her meant trusting them. And trust was dangerous. Trust was how people got hurt. But she was so tired, so incredibly tired. "Fine," she said finally. "But we do this my way." David smiled, and Isabella felt something flutter in her chest. Something she hadn't felt in years. They worked together until 2 a.m. And Isabella was surprised to find that David's ideas were actually good. Not just good, they were brilliant. He saw angles she had missed, found solutions she hadn't considered. When he suggested a completely different approach to the contract problem, Isabella realized he might actually be smarter than she had given him credit for. That could work. She said, looking at his notes, "It's risky, but it could work, sometimes." "The best solutions are risky ones." Isabella looked at him curiously. "Is that your philosophy about everything?" "Pretty much. I think the best things in life require taking chances." "And what if you get hurt?" David was quiet for a moment. "Then you get hurt. But at least you tried. At least you lived." Isabella felt something shift inside her chest. Something warm and terrifying at the same time. The next morning, Isabella woke up at her desk with David's jacket draped over her shoulders. She had fallen asleep while working, and he had covered her up before leaving. The simple kindness of the gesture made her throat feel tight. She found David in the break room, making coffee. He looked tired but alert. "You stayed all night," she said. "Someone had to make sure you didn't work yourself into the hospital." Isabella felt that flutter again, stronger this time. "You don't have to take care of me." "I know I don't have to. I want to." The words hung in the air between them. Isabella didn't know what to say. She had built her entire life around not needing anyone, around being completely self-sufficient. But David was offering something she had forgotten existed. Genuine care without expecting anything in return. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because you're worth taking care of, even if you don't believe it." Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes, and she quickly looked away. She couldn't cry. Not here, not in front of him, not ever. "We should get back to work," she said. Her voice shaky. "Isabella, Miss Rodriguez," she corrected automatically. David nodded slowly. "Miss Rodriguez, are you okay?" No, she wasn't okay. For the first time in years, the walls she had built around herself felt like they were crumbling. And it was terrifying. "I'm fine," she lied. "I'm always fine." But as they walked back to her office together, Isabella knew that something had changed. David wasn't just her colleague anymore. He was becoming something much more dangerous, someone who saw through her armor and cared about the person underneath. And Isabella Rodriguez, the Ice Queen who controlled everything, was slowly losing control of her own heart. The Hawthorne merger was falling apart, and Isabella felt like she was falling apart with it. She stared at the email on her screen, reading the same line over and over again. The client was threatening to pull out of the deal because of communication issues with their legal team. Communication issues. Isabella knew what that meant. It meant she had been too harsh, too cold, too much like herself. Miss Rodriguez? David knocked on her office door. I heard about the client meeting. Are you okay? Isabella wanted to scream. She wanted to throw her computer across the room. She wanted to cry. But instead, she just sat there, staring at the screen. I'm fine, she said, but her voice cracked on the words. David closed the door behind him and sat down across from her desk. You don't look fine. I said I'm fine, Isabella snapped, louder than she intended. I don't need you to check on me every 5 minutes like I'm some kind of child. David didn't flinch. He just looked at her with those kind eyes that made her feel exposed and safe at the same time. When's the last time you went home? He asked quietly. Isabella blinked. She couldn't remember. What day is it? Friday. You've been sleeping in your office for 3 days. Had it really been 3 days? Isabella looked around her office and noticed the empty coffee cups, the wrinkled clothes, the blanket on her couch that she had been using as a bed. When had her life become this? I need to fix this, she said, gesturing at her computer. I need to call the client and explain. Isabella, stop. She looked up, surprised. David had never used her first name before. You can't fix everything by working harder. Sometimes you need to step back and breathe. I don't know how to do that, Isabella said, and the honesty in her own voice surprised her. Then let me help you. David stood up and walked around her desk. For a moment, Isabella thought he might touch her, might put his hand on her shoulder or something. But he just stood there, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Come on, he said. We're leaving. I can't leave. I have work to do. The work will be here tomorrow. But if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be. Isabella looked at him, really looked at him. His hair was messy, his tie was loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He had been working just as hard as she had, staying late to help her, bringing her food she forgot to eat. When had someone last cared about her this much? Where will we go? She asked. Anywhere but here. 20 minutes later, they were walking through Central Park. Isabella couldn't remember the last time she had been outside during daylight hours. The sun felt warm on her face, and she realized how much she had missed it. My sister used to bring me here when I was little, David said as they walked past a playground. She pushed me on the swings for hours. You have a sister, had. She died in a car accident when I was 16. Isabella stopped walking. I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's okay. It was a long time ago. But she taught me something important before she died. What's that? That work isn't life. Work is just what you do to pay for life. The real living happens in between. They sat down on a bench near a pond. Isabella watched a family feeding ducks, the children laughing as the birds fought over breadcrumbs. She tried to remember being that carefree, that happy. But the memories felt like they belonged to someone else. What about you? David asked. Any family? Isabella's chest tightened. I have a sister too. Had. I mean, she's not dead, but we don't talk anymore. What happened? Isabella was quiet for a long moment. She had never told anyone this story. Not her colleagues, not her friends, not even her therapist. But sitting here with David, watching the sun reflect off the water, it felt safe to remember. When I was 12, my parents got divorced. It was ugly. They used me and my sister like weapons against each other. My sister, she was older, and she tried to protect me. But I was so angry, so hurt. I blamed her for things that weren't her fault. Isabella felt tears starting to form, but she kept talking. When I turned 18, I left for college and never looked back. I thought I was being strong, independent. But really, I was just running away. My sister tried to reach out over the years, but I was too proud, too scared. And now it's been so long. I don't know how to fix it. David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's never too late to try. What if she hates me? What if she doesn't want to see me? What if she does?" Isabella looked at him, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip. Not pity, not judgment, just understanding. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. But being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. Isabella felt something loosening in her chest, like a knot that had been tied too tight for too long. "David, yeah, thank you for bringing me here, for everything." He smiled, and Isabella felt that flutter in her chest again. But this time, she didn't push it away. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why do you care about me? I mean, I haven't exactly been nice to you." David turned to face her fully. "Because I see who you really are. Under all that armor, under all those walls you've built, you're not cold, Isabella. You're just protecting yourself. And I think you're worth protecting." Isabella felt a tear roll down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. But David had already seen it. "I don't know how to be anything else," she said. "You don't have to figure it out all at once. Just try, one day at a time." As they walked back to the office, Isabella felt different, lighter somehow, like she had been carrying a heavy bag for years and had finally set it down. That night, she did something she hadn't done in 15 years. She opened her laptop and started typing an email to her sister. Her hand shook as she wrote, and she deleted the message 3 times before finally hitting send. The next morning, David found her crying at her desk, but these weren't sad tears. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something that felt like healing. She wrote back, Isabella said, holding up her phone, "My sister, she wants to have lunch." David smiled, and Isabella realized that somewhere along the way, his happiness had become important to her. More important than any case, any client, any career milestone. "I'm proud of you," he said. And for the first time in her adult life, Isabella Rodriguez felt proud of herself too, not for winning a case or impressing a client, but for having the courage to be vulnerable, to be human, to be real. The Ice Queen was melting, and Isabella was finally ready to let her go. Everything was falling apart, and Isabella felt like she was watching her life crumble in slow motion. The phone call had come at 7 a.m., jolting her awake from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks. "Miss Rodriguez, we have a problem." It was Mr. Sterling, and his voice was ice cold. "My office, now." Isabella threw on her clothes and raced to the firm, her heart pounding. When she walked into Sterling's office, she found him sitting with a man she recognized but had hoped never to see again. Vincent Hawthorne, her former client from 3 years ago. The man who had nearly destroyed her reputation once before. "Vincent," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "what are you doing here?" Vincent smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made Isabella's skin crawl. "Hello, Isabella. You look well. Success suits you." "Get to the point," Sterling said impatiently. "Tell her what you told me." Vincent leaned back in his chair, enjoying the moment. "I need a favor, Isabella. A small legal matter that requires your particular skills. I don't work for you anymore, Vincent. Find another lawyer." "Oh, but you do work for me. You see, I have some very interesting documents about the Morrison case you handled last year. Documents that show you may have bent the rules a little." Isabella's blood ran cold. The Morrison case had been messy, and she had pushed some boundaries to win it. But she had never done anything illegal, had she? "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" "Because I have emails, Isabella. Emails that show you knew about. Evidence that should have been turned over to the other side. Evidence you conveniently forgot to mention." Isabella felt sick. She remembered those emails. Remembered the gray area she had navigated. She had convinced herself it was just good lawyering, but now "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want you to represent me in a little business matter. Nothing too complicated. Just help me acquire a small company. The owners are being difficult." Isabella knew what that meant. Vincent wanted her to find a way to force people out of their own business, to destroy their lives, so he could make more money. "I can't do that." "You can, and you will. Unless you want these documents to end up with the State Bar Association. Your career would be over, Isabella. Everything you've worked for, gone." Sterling was watching this exchange with cold interest. "Miss Rodriguez, I suggest you consider Mr. Hawthorne's offer carefully. This firm cannot afford any ethical violations." Isabella felt trapped. Everything she had built, everything she had worked for, was hanging by a thread. But as she thought about what Vincent was asking her to do, she felt sick. A few months ago, she might have done it. She might have found a way to justify it, to tell herself it was just business. But now she kept thinking about David, about the way he looked at her like she was worth something, about the conversation they'd had in the park, about being brave, about being the person she wanted to be instead of the person she thought she had to be. "I need time to think," she said. "You have until tomorrow morning," Vincent said, standing up. "Choose wisely, Isabella. You know what happens to lawyers who cross me." After Vincent left, Isabella sat in her office staring at the wall. She felt like she was drowning, like the old Isabella was pulling her back down just when she had started to surface. David knocked on her door around lunchtime. "Hey, I brought you a sandwich. You missed breakfast," and he stopped when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" Isabella wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to pour out the whole story, to ask for his help, to let him hold her while she figured out what to do. But how could she explain that she might lose everything? How could she tell him that her past mistakes were catching up with her? Nothing. She said, "Just work stuff." David sat down across from her. "Isabella, we've been through this. You don't have to handle everything alone. This is different." "How?" Isabella looked at him. Really looked at him. He was wearing the blue tie she had complimented once, and his hair was slightly messy the way it got when he ran his hands through it while working. He cared about her, really cared about her, and she was about to lose him. "What if I told you I made a mistake?" she said quietly. "A big mistake that could ruin everything. Then I'd say everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do next. And if doing the right thing meant losing everything I've worked for." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What good is success if you have to become someone you hate to keep it?" Isabella felt tears starting to form. "I'm scared, David. I'm so scared." "Of what?" "Of losing everything. Of going back to being nobody. Of losing you." David reached across the desk and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her, and Isabella felt electricity shoot through her entire body. "You could never lose me," he said softly. "Not by being honest, not by doing the right thing. You could only lose me by pretending to be someone you're not." That night, Isabella made her decision. She called Vincent and told him she wouldn't represent him. She called the State Bar Association and reported herself for the Morrison case. Irregularities. She called Sterling and told him she would take full responsibility for any consequences. By the next morning, the whole firm knew. Isabella walked through the halls feeling like everyone was staring at her, whispering about her. Her career was probably over. Her reputation was definitely damaged. But for the first time in years, she felt clean. David was waiting in her office with 2 cups of coffee and a small smile. "So," he said, "what's the plan now?" "I don't know. I might get suspended. I might get fired. I might never work as a lawyer again." "And how do you feel about that?" Isabella thought about it for a moment, terrified, but also free, like I can finally breathe. David nodded. "You know, there are other law firms, smaller ones where they care more about helping people than making money. You think anyone would hire me after this?" "I think the right people would hire you because of this. Because you chose to do the right thing even when it was hard." Isabella felt something warm spread through her chest. "What if we started our own firm? You and me?" David raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me to be your partner? In every sense of the word, Isabella said, and she meant it. David smiled. And Isabella realized that losing everything had actually helped her find the one thing that mattered most. Not success, not reputation, not money. Just this man sitting across from her, believing in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Yes, he said simply, to all of it. Isabella felt tears of relief roll down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she had chosen love over fear, truth over convenience, and the person she wanted to be over the person she thought she had to be. It was the scariest thing she had ever done, and it was the best decision of her life. 6 months later, Isabella stood in the small office space she and David had rented in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. The walls were brick, the furniture was secondhand, and the coffee machine made weird noises. It was nothing like her old corner office with its glass walls and expensive leather chairs. She had never been happier. Rodriguez and Chen Legal Services read the simple sign by the door. They had argued about the name for weeks. David had wanted Chen and Rodriguez, but Isabella had insisted on alphabetical order. It was one of their few real fights, and they had solved it by flipping a coin. The Patterson family is here, David called from the front desk. They couldn't afford a receptionist yet, so they took turns answering phones and greeting clients. Isabella smoothed her skirt and walked to the small conference room. The Patterson family was huddled together on the old couch they had bought at a garage sale. Mrs. Patterson was holding a baby, while Mr. Patterson had his arm around a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5. "Thank you for seeing us," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice shaky. "We didn't know where else to go." Isabella sat down across from them, and David joined her with a notepad. This was how they worked now, together, as a team, as equals. "Tell us. What happened?" Isabella said gently. The story came out in pieces. Mr. Patterson had been injured at work, and the company was trying to avoid paying his medical bills. The family was drowning in debt, facing eviction, and the big law firms wouldn't take their case because there wasn't enough money in it. 6 months ago, Isabella would have turned them away. She would have calculated the potential profit and decided it wasn't worth her time. But now, looking at this family who just needed someone to fight for them, she felt something she had never felt before in her career. Purpose. "We'll take your case," she said. Mrs. Patterson started crying. "We can't pay much. We'll figure out the money later," David said kindly. "Right now, let's focus on getting you the help you need." After the family left, Isabella and David sat in their little office going through the case files. They had 12 active cases, and most of their clients were people who couldn't afford traditional legal fees. They were barely breaking even, but Isabella had never felt more fulfilled. "Do you ever miss it?" David asked, looking up from his laptop. The big firm, the fancy office, the expensive suits. Isabella considered the question. "Sometimes I miss the security, knowing exactly where my next paycheck was coming from. But I don't miss the person I was there. You weren't a bad person, Isabella. You were just protected." "I was cold," Isabella said honestly. "I was so afraid of getting hurt that I forgot how to care about anything." David set down his laptop and moved to the couch, where Isabella was sitting. "And now I care about everything. Too much, maybe. Yesterday I cried because we won the Henderson case. Actually cried in front of the client." David laughed. Mrs. Henderson cried too. She said she had never had a lawyer who cared about her like a real person. Isabella smiled. "My sister says I'm completely different now. She can't believe I'm the same person who used to be so." What did she call it? Emotionally unavailable. "How are things with her?" "Good, really good. We have lunch every Sunday, and she's coming to the office barbecue next weekend." Isabella paused. "I told her about us." "What did she say?" She said, "It was about time I let someone love me." David reached over and took her hand. "And how do you feel about that?" Isabella looked at their joined hands. David's fingers were long and gentle, with a small scar on his thumb from a childhood accident. She had memorized every detail of those hands over the past few months, terrified. She said honestly, but also happy, really, truly happy. Good, David said, bringing her hand to his lips. Because I love you, Isabella Rodriguez, all of you, the strong parts and the scared parts and everything in between. Isabella felt her heart skip. They had been dancing around those words for weeks, both of them knowing but neither wanting to be the first to say it. I love you too, she said. And the words felt like freedom. David kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise. When they broke apart, Isabella was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. So what's next for Rodriguez and Chen? David asked. I was thinking we could expand. Maybe hire another associate, get a bigger office. And personally, Isabella grinned, personally, I think I'm ready for whatever comes next, as long as you're with me. David stood up and walked to his desk drawer. Isabella watched curiously as he pulled out a small velvet box. Funny you should mention that, he said, getting down on one knee beside Bella's. Hands flew to her mouth. David, what are you doing? Isabella Rodriguez, you are the strongest, bravest, most caring person I know. You taught me that success isn't about winning at all costs. It's about being true to yourself and fighting for what matters. Will you? Marry me. Isabella looked at the ring, then at David's hopeful face, then round their small, imperfect office filled with case files for people who needed their help. A year ago, she would have said this wasn't the life she wanted. It wasn't prestigious enough, fancy enough, safe enough. But now she realized that safety wasn't about building walls. It was about finding someone you could trust to catch you when you fell. Yes, she said, launching herself into his arms. Yes, yes, yes. They kissed again, longer this time, full of joy and promise and the kind of love that makes everything else seem small. Later that evening, they walked through the same park where they had their first real conversation. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Do you remember what you told me that day? Isabella asked, swinging their joined hands between them. Which part? That the best things in life require taking chances. David smiled. And what do you think now? Isabella stopped walking and turned to face him. I think you were right. I think I spent so many years being afraid of taking chances that I forgot how to live. But you taught me that love is worth the risk. You taught me something too, David said. What's that? That people can change. That it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Isabella looked around the park at the families playing, the couples walking, the children laughing. A year ago, she would have seen all of this as a distraction from work, from success, from the things that really mattered. But now she understood that this was what really mattered. Connection, love, the courage to be vulnerable with another person. I have one more confession, she said. What's that? I never knew how to be happy before. I thought happiness was weakness, that it made you soft, but you showed me that happiness is actually the strongest thing of all. David pulled her close, and Isabella felt the last of her walls crumble completely. She was no longer the ice queen, no longer the woman who controlled everything and felt nothing. She was just Isabella, imperfect and vulnerable and completely, utterly in love. So what happens now? She asked. Now, David said, spinning her round until she laughed. We live happily ever after. And for the first time in her life, Isabella Rodriguez believed that they actually would.